Hello, guys and gals, and welcome. So today I wanted to talk about something interesting, and so I have some footage. This is from the beta, by the way. This is of our fight with the Butcher back in the really early levels. As you see, we had a level 7, level 18, level 20. It was quite a fun fight. It's really not quite as fun. I was going to pull up some footage of some of my more recent Butcher kills, but quite honestly, my Necromancer just absolutely demolishes the Butcher into oblivion once you get a fully geared up character. It's really not that big of a deal. But when he comes and ambushes you at level 20, and you're not exactly ready for him, and your character's still wearing mostly rares and barely even any good legendaries, it is a little difficult to get your to get around the Butcher. Now, granted, we did eventually manage to kill him, so don't think we didn't. We totally smacked his booty after he smacked our booty a couple of times. Now, what I wanted to talk to you today about was not necessarily the Butcher himself, but the Butcher mechanic, and also the future of the Butcher mechanic. I think that the Butcher mechanic is a raging success. I think that just about everybody, for the most part, really likes the Butcher, and I think the few people that don't like the Butcher are probably just the ones that got their cheeks clapped. Let's be honest. Now, the Butcher is a mechanic that shows up in the dungeon and basically comes and tries to kill you. He has pretty good loot, and a lot of the times he will drop for you at least 1 or 2 legendary items, if not a unique, and he can also drop his own Butcher's Cleaver, which you will actually see in this video, if we get that far. And it's actually pretty cool, because I really like when he shows up, because obviously he tries to ambush you, he tries to kill you, obviously, and it's a very good test for how good your character currently is. If your character is well built, if your character is set up properly, you generally don't have much of an issue with the Butcher. However, if your character is not set up properly, if your character is not geared out, if you don't have your build down and have a good understanding of how your character works, a lot of the times the Butcher will end up clapping your cheeks quite severely, and honestly, for good reason, because you don't have things figured out yet. I would like to see them expand on this feature. And what do I mean by expand on this feature? Well, I would like to see them add in more than just the Butcher. I would like to see them add in other monsters that would come attack us. And for this reason, I've kind of compiled a list of various monsters that I think would be pretty cool for them to add in. And, join the list of monsters that come and ambush us in the dungeons. Where is my list? I have the list here somewhere. Of course, I'll pull it up on the screen for you guys, the actual pictures of the monsters. Because that's really what I'm looking at, is I wanted to, actually pull up the pictures of the monsters. So let's start with the first one, which is Duriel. So Duriel, I think, is one of the more classic examples of a monster that ambushes the player. And what do I mean by ambushes the player? Well, I think it's pretty obvious that in Diablo 1, when the Butcher first comes onto the scene, a lot of people don't know, really, that the Butcher is there to, murderize you. They just see a monster, he says, fresh meat, It's his catchphrase, right? And eventually, you get the picture that the Butcher is not to be trifled with. He attacks very fast, he hits very hard, and quite honestly, he's coming for them cheeks. And this is in Diablo 1, mind you, one of the first games. Well, Duriel, which is in Diablo 2, is kind of very similar. In Diablo 2, when you first start playing, you make your way through Act 1, you kill Andariel, and then eventually you make your way to Act 2, and you try to kill basically Baal, who is trapped inside the actual tomb. And you don't actually find Baal in the tomb. Instead, you find Duriel. And Duriel, what does he say? He has his own catchphrase, looking for Baal. And then you're trapped in a tiny little room with Duriel, and Duriel starts trying to clap them cheeks, just the same way that the Butcher did. And if you're not set up properly, if you're not geared out right, guess what? Duriel will also kill you. And I think that Duriel would make a excellent dungeon raider, which is, I guess, kind of what I'll call this mechanic, is the dungeon raiding mechanic, because this is basically a boss that raids the dungeon and comes and tries to kill you, right? So Duriel is definitely a very, very good choice for another dungeon raiding boss. And I could definitely see if they beefed him up a little bit, gave him some pretty hard-hitting attacks, maybe even threw on that horrible Holy Freeze aura that he has in Diablo 2. Things could get really nasty real fast. And I am all for challenging monsters that come to try and kill me while I'm in the middle of my dungeon, because it breaks up the monotony of dungeon farming. There are quite a few more monsters, though, that I would definitely add onto this list. And there's also some other interesting, like, effects that I think could be added in to dungeons, just as a throwback to the original era of Diablo 2. One such throwback is Bale casting his spells on you in Worldstone Keep. So if you guys don't remember, in Diablo 2, when you went through the Worldstone Keep trying to make your way to kill Bale. Bale is actually casting long-range versions of spells on you from like a trillion billion miles away. And if you stand still for too long, he will launch things like poison attacks, lightning attacks, and all sorts of things at you from a various distance. It could be kind of cool to have Bale suddenly appear in a dungeon, and you hear the laughter, and then he starts casting spells on you from a distance when you stand still. Just a very interesting little throwback to an earlier version of the game, Diablo 2, for instance. Now, there's a lot more monsters. Let me pull up the next one. And the next one I was thinking that could raid the dungeon is Rakanishu. Rakanishu is another noob killer, just the same way that the Butcher is a noob killer, and just the same way that Duriel is a noob killer. And what I mean by noob killer is Rakanishu features the enchantment known as lightning enchantment. He always is lightning enchanted from a very early level, and it's one of the things that actually gets you killed the most with Rakanishu, is that early on you don't really have a lot of good resistances to lightning, and hitting him causes the lightning to emit, and you don't really dish out a lot of damage, so it takes a large number of hits to actually kill him. So as you hit him, he emits lightning, the lightning hurts you, and you end up dying. In fact, if I had to rate the monsters in the game as like the number one noob killing character, or the character that has the most kills in the game, it probably is Rakanishu, because he is in Act 1, which is in the beginning of the game. He's in a very early part of the game, where people really don't have a good knowledge and understanding of basically the mechanics. And so a lot of the times they find Rakanishu for the first time. They're brand new characters. And just the same way as the Butcher, they find him and they think they've got it. But they get their butt kicked. Now, Rakanishu doesn't exactly have a catchphrase, other than the fact that apparently they all say random words. So he says things like Rakanishu, his own name. He also says Kalenzo. So Rakanishu, Kalenzo, and I think the third name he says is Bishibosh. So they will repeat the names of the previous, like amazing Fallen, and those are basically the three most powerful Fallen in the community of Fallen, in the world of Fallen, is Bishibosh, Rakanishu, and Kalenzo. Kalenzo the Annihilator, Rakanishu, and Bishibosh is in the Cold Plains. He's not as difficult to fight as Rakanishu, though. Another one that could be very interesting is Andariel. Now, Andariel is not exactly the most difficult boss, but she can be difficult because of her massive poison damage that she offers. And it's one of the first checks for players that poison damage is just really nasty in Diablo 2. And guess what? It's pretty nasty in Diablo 4 as well. And if they did it correctly and had Andariel basically burst into the dungeon the same way that the Butcher does, it could be pretty exciting. I would like to see Andariel bust in and try and kill me. I think that would be great. And obviously the goal here is to make all these monsters actually challenging. You don't want any of these monsters to be easy to kill. You want them to be rather difficult, and you want them to be quite a threat to the players, because that's half the fun. Andariel is classic because she's in Diablo 2, but she's also in Diablo 4, and I think many people would like a chance to fight her again besides the campaign. Another very interesting choice is the Countess. Now, as far as monsters go, I don't think she's necessarily the most ridiculously hard to kill, but she is one that has a very Catchy catchphrase. And I think that's one of the coolest things about the Butcher is that he shows up and he goes, fresh meat, right? Well, and Dario has a catchphrase. Duriel has a catchphrase, you know, looking for bail. And the Countess has a catchphrase as well, which is, here for a bloodbath. And quite honestly, I think it's a pretty cool idea to go off of some of these more iconic characters. And obviously, you could beef her up a little bit, give her some more effects, find a way to make her into more of a challenging monster. And I think if done correctly, a lot of these dungeon invader bosses could definitely be very interesting and something that players look forward to. Another really interesting one that could possibly end up making it into the game, and this one sounds kind of evil, is a pack of glomes. That's right. If you guys remember Diablo 2, glomes were one of the more nasty enemies within the game that did massive amounts of lightning damage and were feared far and wide. And it could be very interesting just to have, like, not even just a boss, but just, like, an entire pack of glomes just appear on top of your head, and you have to, you know, fight or die. Maybe even have one of the glomes being an elite and being, you know, particularly difficult to fight. Another interesting one that I think could be pretty cool is trios of monsters or monsters that are in multiple packs. So, for instance, the Travancore Council could be very interesting. So in Diablo 2, there's the Council of Travancore, which is basically comprised of multiple elites and then also their minions. And it could be interesting to have an entire elite pack jump on top of your head as well. I wouldn't even be opposed to Diablo also. I think Diablo could be a very interesting dungeon invader coming after the players, you know, inside of their dungeons when they're trying to do their best work. Diablo obviously has a lot of various attacks like fire infernos, lightning infernos, like firewalls, all sorts of crazy things that can come out of him. Cold attack hands, which cold enchanted can be pretty nasty as well, to be honest. And quite honestly, I think that the limits of this particular feature are, like, limitless. There are so many cool monsters that could potentially make very interesting dungeon invaders. And I'd like to pick your brains as well. What monsters from the Diablo franchise do you think could make very interesting dungeon invader bosses, similar to the way that the Butcher works? You know, it would be pretty fun to bash your head against as they try and murder you. Anyway, as always, I just wanted to bring you guys attention to something fun and just kind of like have the gears in your brain turn for a minute on potentially what other monsters out there could make some really interesting dungeon invader type bosses. I think I've covered a decent number of them, but you know, put down in the comments what other bosses or what other monsters you think could make very interesting dungeon invaders. I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, even when we're just talking about theoretical things. And as always, keep watching.